People with disabilities deserve the same rights to make informed choices and have access to the broader community and integrated employment just as anyone else. We know that when people are part of their community, they are more likely to make decisions for themselves, have more friends, and better lives. There is a new role called the Home and Community-Based Settings, HCBS Settings role, that helps support these important outcomes. The HCBS Final Settings Rule, or the Settings Rule, is a federal policy change announced by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, CMS, to make sure that people with disabilities have the kinds of services they want in their communities. The rule requires that the places where people receive Medicaid HCBS services offer full access to the benefits of community life. In case you are wondering, if you are receiving supports to live in the community, they are most likely funded by a federal program called Medicaid HCBS, or a waiver, and these clips will help you learn about how this new rule applies to you. One of the reasons that the government came up with the settings rule was because of input from self-advocates who said they wanted more choice, more respect, more access, and more options. Under the settings rule, you get to control where you live and whether you live with someone. You get to control how you earn your money and where you work. You get to control what you do during the day and who you spend time with. You can learn more about what the rule guarantees in the clip, What Does the Rule Guarantee? What are home and community-based services? Home and community-based services help people with disabilities live their everyday lives. They can include things like personal care, respite, residential supports, transportation, employment supports, and other things. These services are provided in the community instead of in nursing homes, institutions, and other settings that may isolate people from other members of the general community. One important point of the settings rule is that there is a difference between institutional services and community services. If people are getting money through Medicaid HCBS, they must be getting community services. States get to decide how they run their Medicaid programs. Keep in mind that HCBS services, sometimes called waiver services, might have different names in different states, but the point of the services is to help you live your everyday life. To be on the waiver, people must show that they need support to live in the community. Without the services provided through the waiver, they may have to live in an institution. Although HCBS waiver services have been available since the 1980s, many people with disabilities still do not have the opportunities they would like to be active and inclusive members of their neighborhoods and local communities alongside people without disabilities. They may live in the community but might not be a part of the community. The settings rule was passed to help address this. There are some important dates for you to know about. Let's talk about 3 in particular. The settings rule came out in 2014, but it takes time for states to evaluate all of their services and for providers to make changes. States were originally told by the federal government that they had until 2019 to follow the rule. But now the federal government has given states a little more time, and they now have until 2022 to fully comply. As part of the settings rule, every state was required to submit a statewide transition plan, sometimes called an STP, to CMS. CMS stands for the Center on Medicare and Medicaid Services. They are the federal agency that oversees the HCBS program and helps pay for it in each state's transition plan. They must describe how they will make sure that the settings where people live, work, spend their day, and receive HCBS services are truly community-based. You can visit www.hcbsadvocacy.org to find out about your state's STP and learn about opportunities to provide input into the plan and the way it is carried out. Throughout the transition process, states should ask you for input about the HCBS services you receive, the places where your services are provided, and changes that could be made to help you get the community life you want. This is your chance to share what community life means to you. You can learn more about what you can do to make sure your voice is heard in the clip entitled A Call to Action. Even though the settings rule was put in place for states, providers, and agencies to follow, the reason the government made the settings rule was for you, for people receiving services. You can learn about the settings rule and what it guarantees you as a person receiving Medicaid HCBS services in the clip, What Does the Rule Guarantee? You can learn more about the choices you should be making in the clip called Your Life, Your Choice. An additional clip called Rights, Restrictions, and Modifications outlines the assurances that must be in place if any of your rights are restricted or modified. The settings rule also lists additional requirements that must be met in settings that are owned or controlled by a provider, both in residential and in day and work settings. These are covered in 2 clips: HCBS provider requirements for residential settings and HCBS provider requirements for non-residential settings. The settings rule also provides conditions for person-centered planning. You can learn more about person-centered planning in the clip HCBS and person-centered planning. It's important to remember that the settings rule covers all types of HCBS settings. If you live in a group home, for example, or go to a day program and receive HCBS services, the rule applies to you. We invite you to watch the following clips to learn more about the HCBS final settings rule and learn how it can help ensure you have access to the community, choice, individual rights, and independence. If your HCBS services don't provide you with these opportunities, the clips will assist you to find ways to speak up and make a change.